interesting. And what do you think? I mean, if you look now to people that are aspiring to be future employee experience leaders, what do you think are some of the challenges that they're going to encounter in their career?
I think one is just realizing that the world of work is changing. I mean, for the longest time, we've been talking about the future of work, and the future is now. It's here, and I
Ta-da.
think the biggest challenge is exactly that. It's just
Yeah.
appreciating the fact that we have to co-create solutions. I like the concept of co-creation because for me, it also breaks away that old way of thinking that decisions are made in one big dark room by exco or somebody in the leadership team. Of course, they hold the seat and play a key part as leaders, but firstly, there's levels of leadership.
Yeah.
And how do we bring everybody along? People who are closer to the ground, closer to the reality, the very employees that we are leading. How do we get them to be part of co-creating, even things like our internal communication approach, from a traditional one-directional way of communicating, but making it a dialogue and getting feedback and actually doing something about it. Again, we've had the traditional employee engagement surveys, but for me as employee experience leaders, how do we actually use that in a way that we are always in tune and in check in terms of the direction that we want to go in. So I think those are some of the challenges. I think competition has also changed. I mean, if I use ourselves as Vodacom as an example, I mean, we moving from being a traditional telecoms organization to being a technology company.
Okay.
At least this is our ambition, our 2025 strategy, and we've been very vocal about it. But when we now talk about being in the technology space, our competitors is not the traditional fellow telecoms people. Of course, they still compete in the same space because they're on a similar journey. But also when we're now talking broader ICT and we're talking about well-established technology organizations, how are we perceived by those talents when we want to attract them into our space? Do they even get what we're trying to do, or do they see us as this old fuddy-duddy, like trying to be like us, and for me, that's part of being, when you're a leader in the employee experience, it's the experiment, it's the failing, it's whoever we hire. For me in this first season of the transformation is going to be part of changing the organization. So that's a different type of talent and leadership that you need versus maybe when we're on the other side of 2025 and kind of a recognizable technology company. And these are some of the things for me, which it's being open to experiment, test, fail, quickly move to the next thing. And that can be daunting. Certainly, I think in an HR function, for me, we're sometimes seen as the black and white governance Bible bashers. This is how you do things and the only way to do it. And I think really a lot of leaders are going to be tested, and the leaders who are going to do well are the ones who can navigate in a flexible way, try something out, and if it doesn't work, be okay with that. It's not that the policy was signed off on the 1st of June, so this is the policy from now henceforth. It will never to be changed again. Refer to paragraph 3. But maybe after 6 months of trying, I don't know, the remote working policy, the new ways of working, because beyond COVID, we want to still now keep the hybrid model, the remote working. And then we realized after 6 months that actually this only works for X percentage of employees because we didn't consider X, Y, Z. Okay, let's rethink the guideline. That's the future, and that's the way of working, and it doesn't mean it's now ticked off. Let's move on to, I don't know, the mental health policy and never look at the other one ever again. It's a constant renewal. And I think for me, these are the challenges of the new world. And so these are also the skills that as leaders of employee experience, we all need to have and be okay with.
Well, I mean, that was really my next sort of question, but I mean, I think you're bringing it almost straight into it. But I mean, that's a very interesting way of looking at it. I mean, especially with your talking about moving into more of a technology space, you almost need to look at the strategic side and saying, how do we bring agile thinking from a tech space, and how do we apply that strategically to HR almost as a skill set, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I've heard some people say, oh, this agile thing, it's a buzzword and it will go away. Maybe it could come back rebranded by another term, but it's definitely not going away. I mean, I
Yeah.
think being adaptable, being flexible, the experiment, learn, and be fast about it, that's not going away, because that's also just how the world is moving. And if we want to be relevant, of course, we can be traditional and say, well, we signed this off in 2001 and that's it. But if you want to win, if you want to be relevant, I think those are the skills that we would need definitely. Agile way of working. How do we balance that? And I think choices. So I've I've been in one organization which has kind of flipped from, waterfall when we're doing agile and that's the way of working.
Yeah.
I've seen organizations which transition. So in this space, we just want to already adopt the agile way of working, and slowly, transition the other spaces.
Yeah.
For me, whatever choices that are made, but you can't ignore the fact that you do need to start to think about how that impacts your day-to-day ways of working.
And what other skills do you think, I mean, that are, I suppose, not to be too leading, but what are the other skills do you think that are considered to be non-traditional HR, do you think should be adopted by people that want to move into this space?
Wow, I mean, one of the things we're talking about at the moment, and even learning, I guess, as we're talking about it, is in the whole reskilling agenda. I mean, typical skilling, reskilling capability, of course, that's an HR agenda.
Sure.
But when you get into the details of it, how we reskill the organization, the approach to sourcing for the organization, for me, I found that it challenges our traditional way of looking at things from an HR point of view. So, I mean, for example, with crowdsourcing, that's one of the things that we're starting to look at, which is it's a concept which in the technology space a lot of people are starting to talk about. But when you talk about it in the context of talent, and thinking about maybe sometimes when we need resources for a project, it's not the typical here's a vacancy, advertise it, come back. But now we're saying maybe the knowledge that we need for this particular piece of work exists outside of the organization. And how do we tap into that? How do we open it up broader in the organization? Maybe you're sitting in HR, but you could contribute to a marketing piece of work.
Yes.
And then still be an HR person,
Of course.
or vice versa, a marketing person working with finance on something. And what do we call that then? Is it a job? Is it a project?
Yeah.
And we in that space of exploration, and it's great. And I think that shifts the traditional boundaries of this is what a job is. And these are and you can't cross the line or the parameters. I think it's going to have to translate into other spaces as well, because then how do you reward and recognize that? And also then what are those boundaries? So if we're talking then about skills and a particular capability and a need in a moment, what happens to then jobs as we understand them? I think I would say 18 months ago, we, from a Vodacom point of view, launched what it was called One More Skill, which was a reskilling initiative. And we've done phase one based on the 4 IR skills that everybody's talking about, World Economic Forum, how we see Vodafone evolving, and lots of other benchmarks. And now we're at the stage where we have to enter phase two, which is really making it more personal when we look at our career paths. And what does it really mean in terms of jobs now? Is everyone going to become, I don't know, a web designer? Is that realistic? And I think, that is a non-traditional way, moving from classic job, looking at specific skills, and different ways of sourcing and approaching even assignments for that matter, from a development point of view.
Yeah, that's a very interesting way of looking at it. I'm quite fascinated by that. And I think it is very, I mean, you talk also about recognition and reward, but then, I mean, it really challenges the whole, KPI models. And, I mean, I think that people have to move away from some of those. If you're looking at having core competencies that can do a whole lot of different things that are needed in the moment, how do you recognize and reward that? But also, how do you, I mean, what does the other side of that look like if people aren't performing? That's very interesting. But that's we'll solve that for another another day.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because that can get but that's a very interesting topic for me.